Hello, algebra. How are you? We're going to do some equations. We're going to use percents to solve those equations. I was thinking these ladies look like Mrs. Kilgus and I. We're having a party. Anyway, let's look at this. So we're looking at changing percents to fractions and fractions to percents and things like that. So we're going to start with fractions to percents. And our first method is to find an equivalent fraction, or a fraction that's exactly the same, where the denominator, that's the down here, is 100, and the numerator is the percent. And so if we have one like number 1, where my denominator is already 100, then I can just read this off as 44%. Okay. Now, if in number 2, my denominator is not 100, you have to figure out what you'd have to multiply this number by to get to 100. So 20 times what is 100? Do it on the calculator. Divide 100 by 20. What number do you get? You should have got 5. So 20 times 5 is 100. But remember, anytime we change a fraction, if we change the denominator, the bottom, we have to change the numerator, the top. So since I multiplied by 5 on the bottom, I have to multiply by 5 on the top. That gives me 5 over 100. So therefore, this fraction is the same as 5%. Okay? Great. Now, let's look at another method. Method 2 is divide the numerator and the denominator, or by the denominator, divide the numerator by the denominator, multiply that by 100, or move the decimal 2 spots to the right, whichever way you learned how to do this last year. Either one works. And then that would put your decimal into the 100th place. And then you're good to go. So 8 divided by 250. Do that on your calculator. Do that longhand, whatever. Don't do it underneath here because we're going to write our answer under here. 8 divided by 250 gives us 0.032. Now, if we use this method here, moving the decimal 2 places to the right, we're going to take the decimal, move it 2 places over to the right, and so then my new decimal is in between the 3 and the 2. So that would give me 3.2%. I could also just multiply this number by 100. You don't have to do both methods. Pick one or the other. And when you multiply this by 100, you would get 3.2, and then you just add the percent sign. So that's how we're going to do this. So pick a method. Do number 4, come with that done. So divide your fraction, get a decimal, and then change it to a percent from there by either doing multiplying by 100 or moving your decimal 2 places to the right. So come with that one done in class. Okay, how do I change a percent to a fraction? Well, we just learned that if we have a fraction with a number over 100, then we would be able to get the percent from the decimal, right? Or the fraction, either one. So wouldn't we just write the percent value without the sign over 100 and then reduce the fraction? So this, right, 43% is going to become 43 over 100. 43 over 100. So I'm just doing what we learned in the first method backwards. Can I reduce this fraction? Can I divide both of these numbers by the same number? Nope, that's my answer. So I can't reduce that fraction. But number 2 I can. Number 2 I can. So if I do 130 over 100, I'm going to get 130 over 100. And now I can reduce this fraction. I can divide both of these numbers by 10. If I divide both those numbers by 10, I would get 13 over 10. Can I reduce that fraction anymore? No. So now I'm done. All right, let's look at 0.2%. Now this one's a little tricky because we can't have a decimal when we start this process. So the very first step is to change this 0.2 over 100 to move this decimal over. When I do that, when I move this decimal over, I have to add a 0 down under the 100. So it becomes 2 over 1,000. So I move it over, put in a 0, that becomes 2 over 1,000, and that's going to be equal to 1 over 500 when I reduce both the top and the bottom by dividing both by 2. Okay, so that's a little tricky. Pay attention to that. Use your notes. All right, next thing, express each decimal as a percent. Well, we know from earlier that we can move our decimal to make it a percent. So couldn't we just move the original decimal 2 places to the right? Fill in the any open spaces with a 0 if I have any, and then rewrite it as a new decimal. I could do that, right? Right. So what do I mean by that? Okay, if I'm looking at this first one, I'm going to move my number or my decimal 2 places over to the right. Now my new decimal is between the 7 and the 5, so that would be 37.5, and then I just add the percent sign. Okay? Number 2, I'm going to do the same thing. Move my decimal 2 places to the right. Okay? I don't have to add any zeros because I don't have any empty spaces. But now that number is 475 because I moved my decimal behind the 5. 475, add the percent sign. Great. Number 3, I'm going to do the same thing. Move my decimal 2 places to the right. So what am I going to have? I move it 2 places to the right. It's in between the 0 and the 3, and we would read that as 10.3%. Okay? So don't make this hard. Just make sure you know when you have to move your decimal to the right and when you have to divide and things like that. All right. Now, we can figure out the percent, and percent problems can be written 3 different ways. We can know 40 and we can be looking what the percent is of 100, or we know that 40 is 50% of, well, what number? 40 is 50% of, that would be half, so that would be 80. But we don't want to do this mentally, because if we have longer problems, harder problems, we need to know how to do the algebra. And then here we're looking for what percent is 50% of 120. So those are all going to be different numbers in each of these cases, but we could represent that with an X because it's what we don't know, or any other variable of our choosing. So let's look at a problem. I'm going to do this 2 ways. You pick the way that you like the best and go from there. So we have this proportion. We learned about proportions in our last section, and this is a specific proportion. Just like we had a specific equation to find area of a circle, this is a specific proportion to find percent of something. And it goes like this. That's percent of 100 equals whatever the is part of the sentence is and whatever the over whatever the of part of the sentence is. So what is 15% of 60? So what don't I know? I don't know the is part because I definitely know the percent part, right? This would be 15 over 100 because this is my percent. And then my x would be my is, and my 60 would be my of. So we're going to look at that. And then we could also write it in an equation, change the decimal, and then solve. But we have to remember to change the decimal in this one. So let's talk through one of these. If I have what is 15% of 60, I can write 15 over 100 because it's the number of the percentage over 100 without the percent sign. My is my green part, so that's what I don't know, like I said. That's my x. And then my 60 is my of. Okay, so we learned how to do this. We can cross multiply and then divide and get an answer. So 100x equals the result of this multiplication. I divide by, would be 900. I would then divide that by 100 and get 9. Okay, so I could do that, or I can do it more algebraic. What is 15% of 60? X equals is always whatever, wherever the is always means my equals, and of in algebra always means multiply. So I'm going to take my percent, I'm going to change it to a decimal, move my decimal not to the right this time because it's already a percent. So this time I'm going to move it to the left. And I'm going to get 0.15, and then I'm going to multiply that by 60. Same answer, different way of doing it. I'm doing the exact same thing because when I multiply this and divide by that, I'm actually taking the product and then dividing it by 100, which is my decimal. All right, let's try another one. 52 is 40% of what number? So if you want to try this on your own, write your percent over 100 equals your is over of, and then fill in the numbers, cross multiply, and divide by the extra number. And then over here, write the equation and solve. But let's look at this. So 52 is my is, 40 is my percent, of is what I'm looking for, so that's my x. So how does that look? 40 over 100, no percent sign. 52 is on top, x is on the bottom. I'm going to multiply here, and divide by the 40. So multiply this, divide by that. When I do that, I get an answer of x equals 130. All right, what about the algebraic way? 52 is 40% of what number? Write the equation. Remember, I have to write my decimal as a percent, or my percent as a decimal. So I have to change that to 0.40. I take my decimal, it's after the 0. I move it 2 places to the left, and I get 52 is equals 0.40 times x. So what am I going to do to solve this? How am I going to get x by itself? I'm hoping you said divide by 0.40 because you would be great. Divide both sides by 0.40. When you do that, when you do this 52 divided by 0.40, you're going to get your answer, which is 130. Okay? This 130 shouldn't be here. That should be an x. I don't know why that says 130. Sorry about that. There we go. Now it's right. Okay. Whew. One more example. 37 is what percent of 296? I'm going to let you try that one on your own. Do both the is over of, do the proportion, and do the algebra. You know what? I'll let you pick which way you want to do it. Either one. Either the proportion or the algebra, and come with that one done in class. So we can also use the percent proportion or the algebra for a word problem. In a bag of party favors, 39 out of 60 are whistles. 39 out of 60. So we know the of. Is 39 my is? Or is that my percent? Well, the question says what percent of the party favors are whistles. So it's definitely your is. So if you set up your proportion, you have your is over your of. You have x over 100 because I don't know what my percent is. And then I'm just going to cross multiply, get 3,900, and divide that by 60, and get 65%. That's all. That's all I have to do. I could have done that algebraically too. All right, now let's talk tips. Bill for my dinner is $37.60. I want to tip the waitress 20%. What is her tip? So when we're talking tips, we look at how to do that. So tip equals your bill times whatever percent you want to tip. So if you want to tip 20%, you're going to do 0.20. If you're going to tip 30%, which you wouldn't do probably, you'd do 0.30. 15% would be 0.15. Okay, so your bill is $37.60. I'm going to multiply that by 0.20 because remember I have to change it to a decimal. And then I'm going to get an answer. Now that's just going to give me my tip. Okay, so that's what is her tip. That's answer this question. But here it says what is the total that you're paying the restaurant? So what do you need to do with this tip to figure that out? Yep, add it together. Total I pay is my bill plus my tip, and I figured that out by adding them together. When I add them together, I get $45.12. That is all for our notes, my friends. Do well. Do this couple that I asked you to do. Make sure you come with them done, and we'll check them in class. God bless.